In this video, we strive to remain spoiler-free, discussing only story and plot elements from the books relevant to what has occurred already on the show. When necessary, a spoiler warning with a countdown will be given.
Hi, I'm Jen.
And I'm the Geeky Hippie. Welcome back to What the Adaptation. We're the show that reviews adaptations from one form or another just for you. Not for them, for you. Welcome back. We have a returning guest. Welcome back, Bill. How you doing?
Doing well. Doing well. Really happy to be here for Sandman. Big fan. So
I know that. You're going on for some of your favorite stuff. You're lucky.
I know.
So, what did everybody think of this week's episode? We did, episode 5, 24/7?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
What did you guys think of this one?
So, not a lot of people know that I'm not a big horror type fan, but so when I wasn't prepared, but I buckled in very quick. I was like, okay, it met the threshold, especially towards the end when all the mutilation started happening. So I was like, all right, like meaning but no, they did it in a way to where someone who's kind of squeamish about those things can be all right with it. Like I didn't have any like nightmares or anything like that. It was good. And especially I like how they began something and the pacing was pretty good to where you got kind of invested in. They showed the bad tapering off bits, and then there was a resolution at the end, which you didn't think was going to happen, that there would be a resolution to the Ruby situation in the same exact episode. Right. You like that, if you didn't know, that came out of nowhere. Like you would be like, okay, what's this going on with the diner? And then, okay.
Even still, in the comic, the resolution is next issue.
It is.
Because this comic ends right there. I like this episode.
In the comic, I expected the next issue for it to really keep going, and it was sort of done.
Yeah.
But that makes me extremely happy because then the following issue is.
I was wondering that this episode's pretty intense.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty intense.
Did anybody I was about to say, did anybody do the audio? Because the audio was far more haunting to me than even the original comics when I read it in the 90s. The audio is way worse.
Yeah.
I mean, it really
Yeah, even when starting from the Cain and Abel audio for some reason, and then like going forward, every time it's so scary. It's very scary. Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one thing to read the desperation in their voice. It's another thing in that audio production. It's so authentic. You hear the horror in their voices as they're saying the stuff that they don't want to say. Mm-hmm. It's just very visceral. So, I mean, for me, the audio was... So I was ready for this for the most part. So
I was too. So what are some other... We've already mentioned a few differences. What are some other changes to the source material that you liked or didn't like, and how it affects the story, And you could talk about all three of the formats if you want.
So the main difference is they are pulling away from the DC line tangential. I'd say the biggest change they did from the source material for me in this episode was finding a way to write the same story without talking too much about Arkham Asylum or Batman or like
Martian Manhunter.
Or have
exactly.
Scott Free. Or having Scott Free on page. Screen.
Completely taken that out, and I would say what do you guys think? It's like a quarter at least of the material between these two comic book issues, maybe. So
at least
that's a good chunk, and they did a very good job of separating that but still telling the same exact story, which had the same resolution and that sort of thing. So I think they did an excellent job with the writing, the pacing, putting the two comic book issues into one show, but then still building that tension. So again, going back to the deviation, there is the DC. They're not tying it into like the Justice League or whatever it was.
I'm fine with that because I love all my stuff that has tie-ins and crossovers. I'm probably one of the biggest nuts for DC CW's Arrowverse. Love the Arrowverse. I love the MCU, but sometimes I'm fine with the story's not connected.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
Right.
The Batman was a great movie, probably my favorite movie about, the Dark Knight, but it has no connections to any of the other movies or the TV shows. It's its
Right.
own independent pocket universe out of DC. And so, and that seems to be something DC's better at. Well, likes to do more often, have separate little pocket universes and all cross over, Arrowverse aside, because that's CW. Just looking at how, I don't know, I lost my frame. I've lost what I was about to say. Brain fart. Okay, so any other thoughts on changing Bill?
Well, for me, there were some character changes that I was actually happy about. The waitress, Betty, she was a lot more older and a bit homophobic in the source material,
Yeah.
which always put me off of her character a little bit. The show version is a lot more relatable. It's like, okay, so I can empathize with her a bit more, because that one aspect of her nasty personality doesn't put me off as much. So I was happy about that change. Didn't like the one thing they did where they sort of hesitated when she was talking to the cook, and he talked about sneaking up to her kid's bedroom, and then they waited like 2 or 3 beats to go, well, he's 21, because for those couple seconds you're going, oh
yeah,
wow,
I know.
oh,
Yeah.
And I think
I don't like that.
I think that's what they wanted us to be doing for
a
beat.
Because
yeah,
but they said he's 21. I'm like, okay,
And that's if you forget that she said he's home. I think they even said college. And that's a big difference between the book and the show. In the show, he's home. In this book, he never came home. Her son never came home. So, but I still can't remember what that was I was going to say. I think I might just put a big old L on my forehead and have it follow my head the entire episode. And I'm sober, and that's the worst part. That a sober brain fart just sucks. But I actually kind of like the TV show more than the comic. I like the audio almost as much.
Right.
But one of the other changes, you said that they had Bet older and homophobic. Not only did they get rid of that, not only did they make a change getting rid of that from her, they also did with Marsh, who they took from a trucker customer to the cook. Because, obviously, Marsh, he could have been homophobic, but he was obviously gay. He talks about sleeping with her son in both, So, but, because they had him homophobic in the comic and the audiobook when he was attacking Judy, I think her name is.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Judy, the abusive ex. That's what I call her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had 2 characters that went from being homophobic in the comic to not being homophobic on the show.
They also cut out the guy who sort of led to his wife's death on purpose. She was an alcoholic. He bought her boxes and boxes of alcohol and just left.
Yeah.
That was Marsh, I think. Marsh and
Marsha. It was Marsh.
Marsh and Marsha.
Yeah.
So I mean that aspect was just For
the most part, not a group in the comic, especially not a group of good people.
There is also a very big horror element that they changed for the show, and I was waiting for it, and it never happened. It was still very horrific, but in the comic and stuff, they had the guy on TV with a little puppet, and he was saying, "Okay, kids, we're all going to kill ourselves and make sure how to slice your wrist from and he was like telling children in a little children's show how they should all be killing themselves at the end of the children's program." And I was like, that was pretty horrific. They got rid of that in the show.
They did have some news stories running in the background that if you paid attention to as things escalated, the news stories escalated about just mass
In both,
destruction.
and that was in
Yeah.
both, all three versions.
Which I enjoyed.
Yes,
Yeah,
I did too.
That little include.
I always like diegetic news that somehow relates to the story. You know, hearing something on the radio or the TV, you know, and then it ties into what the person on the show or movie is going through. I always enjoy that. How well, speaking of stuff like that, how well did they adapt the scenery and costumes, props, and music, and how good was the CG and all that to you?
I enjoyed it.
CG.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I thought it was done well, especially for a bottle episode that's taking place, you know, squeezed into that place. I love the casting of John D instead of making him the way he looks from the source material, because if he walked into that restaurant, everybody would have left immediately.
Yeah.
The way he looks, man, that's just
Yeah.
not going to happen. You're not going to hang out with that guy.
No.
I
And
think
I've
they
been
did great
singing-
with that.
I've been singing David Thewlis's performance as John D for weeks now. He's just,
Oh yeah,
every episode he just like it's almost a Christian Avasarala thing with the Expanse. We decided that anytime that Shora Agdashlu was going to be in an episode, she was automatically one of our top acting spotlights. You know, so we didn't bother counting her against how many we were going to do. She was just so there. And I'm actually of the opinion, with, for me at least, David Thewlis is kind of almost automatically up there if he's in an episode for more than just one scene.
He circled on my notes as my favorite of the episode. So
yeah,
well, come on, he was so good. He's empathetic, but at the same time horrific.
Mm-hmm.
Which is hard to pull off.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think he killed it in that role.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else played their part well, especially, you know, as the first sort of.
Yeah.
I don't really want to get into it. We get into themes because there's a theme of positive and negative of truth. But when that first set of truth sets in, you can see the subtle change in everybody, which is just well done.
Yeah.
I mean, it's well written,
there too.
Well acted. Yeah. Everything about it is like, oh, okay. And you start to see the slide. So, I mean, that really made me happy. It's weird. I was terrified of this adaptation, and it ended up being one of my favorites of all time.
Oh, wow.
Good. That's wow.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The changes they made make sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's understandable, whether it's budget reasons, story reasons, licensing reasons. Every one of them makes sense, but they found something else to add to the story to make up for it. And it's just beautifully done.
Agreed.
Jen, any specific, how do you feel on the costume sceneries, anything in particular?
I like the diner vibe. I like how, like, towards the back of it was a little bit different than the front of a diner. Like the back had like the different lighting and the exposed brick and kind of like a little indie pub snug shop kind of like towards the back. And then towards the front was a typical 50s diner. I like that juxtaposition, almost of saying things are kind of swell in the beginning, and then, you know, it's kind of a juxtaposition there. I kind of like that. I don't know why they did that, because the back of house and, like, you know, the back area where the restroom where it was and stuff like that didn't look like a 50s diner anymore.
It looked like a bar. It looked like the local bar. It looked like a
bar. It did, and I like that. I like that kind of, because I really like little diner scenes and stuff like that. So I was like,
I never
that's
actually thought about it. Something that was bugging me, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And now that you point out, that's what's wrong with the back.
It's not wrong. Maybe they were trying to reconstruct like the front to be a 50s diner for the customers, but like in the back they didn't get to that part, so it was like what the original building was meant to be or something like that. Maybe I don't know.
It's just
but I enjoyed
there was something that in my head I couldn't figure out why it didn't. Something that didn't work. It just there was something off, and not off in a bad way. It was just I couldn't figure out what it was, and thank you, you pointed it out.
I was watching it with my son. He sat down. He works in a kitchen, at a restaurant. And he sat down, we started watching it. Every time they went to the kitchen, he went, "It's so dark in there. That is not safe. That is
So,
not safe." And I was just dying laughing.
just curious, how old's your son?
My son is 24, but he's
Ah,
autistic. So
Okay. Because
yeah.
Sunday,
So
I said that this might be a show, some parents would sit down with their teenage and older kids to watch. And everybody pish-poshed the idea, but your son's 20s.
no, my kid had started reading my copy of Sandman probably 10 years ago when he got into comics.
Oh wow.
So
Would
he
you
was
watch the
interested.
show with him at that age?
Oh, absolutely. At that age,
Okay.
yeah.
See?
He was fine with that sort of thing.
I'm going to have to play that clip in our
He's a
chat.
DC junkie. He loves everything having to do with
Yeah.
DC Comics. So for
Okay.
him, it was a natural. He started watching Lucifer with us when it first came on TV. So I mean,
Max is a fan of that.
I love that show.
I have yet to watch it.
Me too.
Oh, it's good.
I've only seen his appearance in the big, massive Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover on the CW.
And they got to go get Oliver.
Yeah. All right. So, there weren't really much in the way of CG type effects, other than not really. I mean, incidental stuff. But
At the end, a little bit.
Other than TV and phone screens, those are always CG. Those are never actually, almost
Right.
never actually filmed. Especially phone screens. But the prosthetics, in the back when they were taking part, they're chopping their hands up. When you saw that,
the fingers,
the fingers and the nail, it was pretty. Yeah, it was someone who has respect for the prosthetics arts in movies and TV. Yeah, it was some good stuff. So
I appreciate them showing some restraint as well. I mean, they could have gone really gory with the eyes, and they didn't go too far to the point where it was just, people who aren't used to it are going to be ready to get sick. And you don't want to go that far if you don't have to. The implied
that's the second
action
show.
is sometimes the worst.
That's the second show within a month about that I've seen where a character just with two into their eyes. Because I was watching, spoiler for season 4 of Titans again, like I did last week. Somebody does that to themselves in one of the episodes of Titans season 4. Picks up two long pens, and it's far enough back that it hits their brain and they drop. So, but it was just like, and then I'm watching this, I'm like, oh, that hurts. That hurts to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could have been so much worse. I mean, it wasn't like Argento where you slowly see it going into the eye. So I appreciate that.
I don't know what that is, but I'll make sure never to watch it.
Yeah.
That's probably not for me.
So, Jen, how did you feel about the dialogue? Oh, please don't call me sir. But anyways, how do you feel about the dialogue? Do you think it was well adapted? And do you think it was performed well?
Yes, to both. Dialogue is really what kept the tension, is what made the tension from everything being happy toward the end. The vehicle for that was dialogue, 100%. And it was written extremely well. Yes, did they have obviously they had the source material to pull through, but they made quite a few bits of dialogue changes from the comic, and especially with the young kid that's trying to apply, and his dialogue was even further delved into, obviously. So Marsh was obviously had a little bit of a different story as well. So you got
Everybody Everybody had some differences from the book.
I really enjoyed it because, especially with dialogue, if you get too heavy into it or if it's too lean, the pacing gets weird and you don't really understand. But they found that right balance of it, and it was really good.
I almost think that I almost hesitate at this point, and it just occurred to me to call this show an adaptation anymore. It is an adaptation, but I think more of what Neil Gaiman as one of the showrunners on it and working with the writers, seems to have done, because I remember seeing that thing or watching that thing recently where he talked about, over the years he's always made notes on what he would do different. He's always kept track of it. Maybe we should be calling this an update. We get updates in softwares. Could we get update in a story? Because in so many ways they've updated
if it was
it
apples to apples, like if they made another comic, I would say it's an updated. Then I would call it an update. But since you're adapting, it's still an adaptation because you're taking a source material and putting it to a show, which is new.
He is still updating it, from the way we looked at things back in the 80s and 90s to the way we look at things in the 2020s. Like, you wouldn't find as homophobic reactions today
you'd hope
as
hopefully
as you do in the comic, in that comic. And just all kinds of other little things, no more payphones, you got a cell phone. I mean, the things you just take for granted when you change time periods, because it is a serious change in time period. So I don't know, it's an adaptation still, but I think it's in a way an update.
I think I'd call it an upgrade more than an update. As time changed, he sort of added more layers, especially with some of the casting choices, which are great. I don't have any complaints, honestly. There's not one cast member I can think of that I'm angry or upset about at all, which is rare. There's usually at least one I can pick at. This, nothing. But yeah, the themes have been updated as well. The casting has been updated or upgraded, particularly who we see at the end of the episode. Mason, the actor, is love them. Yeah. They are so awesome. And I've been watching the new Quantum Leap, which they are in, and Mason is awesome. So, and I love them for Desire, absolutely.
Yeah, they fit. They fit from what I understand. I haven't read Desire in the comic yet, but I've read about Desire, so I know a bit. And it's like, I do more reading about stories than reading the stories when it comes to comic book stuff. That's how I managed to know so much about so many without actually having to spend the money to read so many.
I started reading Sandman in 1991, right about the time I was a sophomore in high school. So,
just a kid.
Yeah, but a friend of mine had the first issue, was reading it in graphic arts class. He was done with it, so I said, can I take a look at it? And I was hooked from then on. So I stayed glued to the series. Somewhere I have my stack in the garage in a box of, first edition.
Oh, wow.
So
not even bind-ups, but in actual issues, huh?
Yeah. Nice. I picked this one up because I wanted a reading copy. So I picked this one up at Books A Million, which is, entire, basically first half that you would hear in the audio. It's the first audio season.
Okay. Yeah, that's 1 through 20, I think, in the audio.
Yeah.
And the show adapts 1 through 16, skipping issue 9 for some reason. Which I don't I'm gonna read it when I get to that point, but I don't know why it skipped an issue. But that's according to the Wikipedia article on the show. It talks about what every episode is adapting from.
Right. 9, I believe, was the elves, wasn't it?
Okay, it might be. I don't know.
I can tell you right now.
That would make sense for them to leave out.
Right. So, it's a flashback to Shakespeare. So it's a whole Shakespeare thing. There's an entire episode with Shakespeare doing a Midsummer Night's Dream.
It probably would have just messed up with the storytelling of the season.
Honestly, I think we'll get it in season 2, or at least a portion of it.
That would be
because they made a point of him talking. Never mind. Next episode. Sorry.
Yeah. So what is a scene or sequence of scenes that A, you most remembered, B and C enjoyed, and then hated, if you want to go with one you hated? I didn't have a scene I hated.
Neither did I.
And it's, I guess you could call it a scene, but I wouldn't. That's weird to try to call it a scene because it's a couple of different little scenes, but they're not actually a sequence either. It's just the whole idea that they switched from, switched to everybody pairing off. That's not in the comic. It's I like that they had a whole theme, and yes, I will say it now. I spoiler for when we talk about themes in a little bit. Lust, it became a theme in the show, and maybe it's just I got a dirty mind. I like
no.
everybody pairing off. I thought it was interesting to see, especially when it seemed like it was breaking past what people's normal barriers and boundaries would be, and so and that fits in with everything else in the themes, but we'll get to that. So that was for me the thing I liked the most was the way was that pairing off everybody had at one point. Bill?
I didn't have any that I really disliked, honestly. As far as love, I love the whole argument over the burger. As a husband, I know I've been out to dinner with my wife and I'm trying to watch my weight or something. And she'd be like, should you really have that? And your inner monologue is, I am going to eat what I want to eat and I'm going to enjoy it for once. And to see that sort of play out, just it made me smile. And it's leading to trouble, but at the same time, you're like, ooh, haven't we all thought that though? So I really enjoyed that little byplay.
I was eating a couple of quarter pounders while watching that scene. But yeah, that double looked good. That looked ridiculously good. I could hear my arteries clogging as I looked at it and dreamed of eating it. But yeah.
But what a way to go.
How about you, Jen?
I didn't hate anything. I probably would say the most memorable are the things that are different than the comic, because I was already looking, the things that are in the comic I was already kind of prepared for. But there's this one little byplay between Joan, and I don't know, that's not her name, the lesbian lady. What's her name?
Judy.
Yeah. I knew it was a J name. See?
Yep, you were there.
So when she's having a conversation with Matt, and when Bet tries to set them up, and then she moves over, and then she's on her phone, and then she's like, she just tried to set us up. I would not have realized that that's what Bet was doing by sitting them next to each other, but I'm like, oh my god, she did. And then I laughed out loud, and so do my partner, when Matt goes, the service is working, she just doesn't want to talk to you. She goes, what did you say? Like that whole little byplay between Matt and Judy, which was different there, it was very much taken out of a page of something that could happen today, like you said, like in grade, like in today's time. Like he's like I've got 4 bars, she just doesn't want to talk to you. That was great. I really like that. Wasn't too gory for me. That was different from the comic. That was something that came out of left field I wasn't expecting, and their interplay there was very well done. So yeah, I'm gonna say that little scene, it was fun.
It was very funny and awkward at the same time.
Yeah.
Which made it great. You're like, oh, little cringy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That was funny. There was some really funny lines. That one, she just didn't want to talk to you. That you mentioned, Jen. That killed me the first time I saw it.
I was like, oh my god.
That was one of those, almost had a spit take on my laptop, because I was drinking coffee when she said that, and when he said that, and I was just like, oh my.
We're not expecting it. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Did not see that coming when I first saw that show. So, what about a best actor or performance for the episode? Anybody have any names they want to bring up?
John D, man.
David Thewlis.
I mean, Thewlis. He killed
Yeah.
it this episode. Just
He
his
has
facial
been.
expressions as everything was happening around him were top notch.
How about you, Jen?
I like the lady who played Bet and the lady who played Judy very well, and I also like the actor that played Matt. He'll probably be other than
You
like
mean
you said,
Mark?
John D or Mark. Sorry,
The kid with the kid going
I
for
know
the interview?
exactly who I'm talking about. Yes,
Yeah.
I know exactly who I'm talking about.
Interview
Yes,
boy.
he was really good at playing that very awkward but yet like trying to impress. Like he was good. They were all so good. They're all really great. But I would probably say him, followed by Bet, followed by Judy as number 2, 3, and 4. Of course, obviously after John D, like John Duelis, like you said, he's amazing. So I agree with
That
you there.
name, by the way, is the name of an actual sorcerer in history. Whether he actually cast spells is up to anybody's guess, but he was John Dee, worked for Elizabeth I, was her court alchemist and scientist and all kinds of other stuff. That's where DC Comics got the name for
John
Dr.
D.
Destiny,
Dr.
John
Destiny,
Dee.
correct.
Yep.
That's so cool. I did not know that. Thank you for that little
No
tidbit.
problem. See, I heard
that
That
that name and I'm
nugget.
like, that sounds really familiar. And I'm like, that name is I knew it was going to bug me, and I finally just looked it up. I was like, that's exactly what I thought I was remembering. But yeah, during Queen Elizabeth I's reign.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm a big Tudor fan, but I didn't get didn't know that. That's
Yeah.
really awesome.
Wow.
Wow.
Performers for me, Emma Duncan as Bette Monroe was really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought she was really good as Bette. Daisy Head as Judy Talbot. I thought she was good, and I like James Udom as Gary. I didn't catch Gary's last name.
There wasn't one.
There wasn't one. Okay.
No,
I
they
couldn't remember.
never named one.
I didn't think so, but Judy Talbot, I have to look up. I'm not
Actually,
sure. Not Judy
Judy.
Talbot. Not Judy Talbot. The girl who played her, Daisy Head, is who I actually want to have to look up because I think that might be Anthony Stewart Head's daughter. Let me check real quick. She was the daughter of actor Anthony Head and younger sister of actress Emily Head. Okay.
I think
So
I've heard of him.
Yeah. And American audiences will know Anthony Stewart Head from playing Giles on Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yep.
Some of the older members of the audience might remember a running series of coffee commercials where a man who lived in one apartment would always share his coffee with a lady who lives in another apartment, and they would back and forth to each other's apartment, knocking and sharing coffee. And it was like the first TV ad campaign that was kind of like a storytelling thing, and it was groundbreaking at the time. But before he got to be famous for anything else here, that's what he was known for. Just brought that up. But yeah, I thought that's who she was. So we left off with, well, we talked about actors and everything else. So I think that leaves us with themes, the fun part of the show. What are some of the themes that you saw in the show, and did they mirror themes you saw in the book/audio? We'll start with you, Jen.
Well, this is always the hardest one. Like, you guys touched on themes a little bit earlier. About truth. I mean, that's obviously the biggest one, but I don't know.
Honesty was huge. Honesty was huge in this episode.
Yeah.
I think he was also trying to make a point of, don't let stories go too far. Like he was saying, when to end them, because if you keep going, eventually everyone dies. I think there was some sort of point trying to be made there before all the craziness started happening. But I guess at the point was, is if the world that John Dee wanted to create if you barely stepped your toe in it, it could probably maybe have a potential to be better than this world. But he took it way too far, and it got to the point where it was just horrific and horrible, just absolutely just maniacally bad. But
Yeah.
uh like the point, the gesture for people trying to be more truthful to each other at surface level, or if you just barely like brush the surface with trying to be more truthful, but the little things, some of the time it's better, but then you just anything, I think it's a moderate, like anything that you go too like hard in the paint for, whether it be truth or really anything else, like they were even trying to say with Gary and the CEO wife, it was like, I can have a burger every once in a while,
Right.
and that's okay. And she tries to control me so much, like I feel like I have to just go like completely other side. Like you can't be too strict, you can't be too truthful, you can't be too extreme something else, or there's going to be problems. So a minor byplay behind the truth is, because I know that's going to be talked about by both of you, because that is the overarching theme, is a more minor one, I would say, is moderation is a theme between what you eat, how truthful you are, what you do in your life, if you don't love too hard, that sort of thing is good. Moderation. That'll be mine.
Bill?
Yeah, for me, truth, absolutely. Especially the negatives and positives that can come with absolute truth, because there's two sides to that coin. And I think it displayed it well. There's something freeing in being able to be that honest, but there's also a brutal side that's going to cause hurt feelings and issues if that was the way it had to be. So,
Right.
but another one is arrogance. The arrogance of John and his fixed philosophy and not being willing to look at a different perspective is what leads to all of the destruction and everything. It also leads to his downfall, but that only happens because of Morpheus's arrogance. Because right after, what does he say? I never would have thought to do that. He was so arrogant about needing his ruby. So for me, arrogance was also a really big sort of underlying aspect.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't catch on that one until you pointed it out. That was good.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, honesty, as we talked about in our last episode, is there. And another one from our last episode comes up at the end from Dream's point of view, when he's talking, and that people have hopes and dreams, but the hopes are part of the dreams, but he literally did say hope, it was something that John didn't understand, missed,
Right.
that these people, he took from these people by making them always have to be brutally honest. If you're brutally honest, you can't really have hope, because hope is hoping. Well, I can't find it without using hope, but it's relying upon the idea you're not necessarily getting what you want to get, what you need to get, what you're hoping to get. It's against all odds, kind of, in a way.
We need to expect better. And if you take the ability for us to expect something better, it's just misery. So, yeah, I can agree.
Everybody deserves to have the private place in their head and not have to be brutally honest about everything.
Well, I mean, John has that quote where he says, truth is a cleansing fire that burns away the lies we tell others and ourselves. And in one sense, that's true, but in the other sense, it's so one-sided without seeing that little white lies are also social lubricant to get us through life. Mm-hmm. Without those, things are going to be very full of friction. So, I mean, you ask me how I'm doing, and I've had a really crappy day. Do you really want me to sit there and explain it to you, or just go, doing okay?
I used to do the explain.
White lie, right there.
Yeah, I used to be the kind that would actually, with my friends, not just a random person, but somebody I know well, ask me, I'd sit there and tell them, but I don't do that anymore, because I realize people don't want to hear that all the time, So little white lies, they're important, I don't even like to call them lies because it's just such a misnomer. It's just a misinformation,
Yeah.
a misdirect, a distraction, away from what's the real answer would be if I was going to be brutally honest with you.
It's a
But
polite subversion.
Well, it
yeah,
seemed to me like they were trying to make the point that the white lies and stuff is what makes us a civilized society, because you take all that away and people become brutal, animalistic. And that was more shown in the comic than even the show. But
Yeah.
people turn like animals. It's like, I think he was even writing, it's like the alpha male and all the females huddled in the corner. Like that's
hmm
how it gets when you're just automatically forward with people. People fight and would kill each other in like in the street. Like if you didn't have that, what makes us have these civilized, what makes a civilization, not even America, but just in general, for people to cohabitate and exist and reach peace and like broker treaties with each other, is
you know,
decorum and politeness and telling little white lies. And you have to do that in order for us not to devolve back into just an animalistic territorial species, you know.
I was just watching a video off YouTube the other day. I'm pretty sure it was John Green, not his brother Hank Green from the Vlog Brothers,
Mm-hmm.
was talking about in the video. One of the things he discussed in the video was, anthropologists have determined that, we can have up to like, I think the number is like 190 friends, people we know.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that, you kind of lose any real connection, that you don't really know people beyond that number.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently it plays out all over the place, and even sometimes in nature, similar. Maybe not the same number, but there's like a cutoff with other primates where they can only socialize successfully with so many.
Mm-hmm.
And we live in a world where you kind of have to deal with way more than that, and maybe humanity's just not able, the way we've evolved, to mentally handle this larger population. Don't get me wrong. I'm not one of those people like my friend that thinks overpopulation is the root of all of our problems and will be going forward. No, I think we can handle a larger population than we've got, even if we do it smartly and efficiently. But
Good
the
luck with
way
that.
that they tackle, the way they tackled this story, and the way we see this, and just the way we've talked about since then, makes me wonder: is there really something to this number that the anthropologist? I wish I could find it. I didn't have any idea it would come up, otherwise I would have had it ready.
Sorry.
But I'll share. It's all right. I'll share the link and the cards up above
Mm-hmm.
when I do the video. Yeah, it's an interesting thought that everything we're talking about just now kind of made me think of. So
Mm-hmm.
I just
I can see
word
that.
vomit. Yeah, word vomit came out my mouth. So,
No, it connects. So
any other interesting thoughts or anything else on themes? Any other smaller, minor themes that you saw, maybe? Like I mentioned, there was the whole thing with hope, that Morpheus brings up. It's not so much in the comic issue, but that is one of the, even if not mentioned, I don't mention it every week. It's kind of been a running theme so far throughout the season, because he's always hoping to get his tools back. Dream has a dream, getting
right,
his tools back.
Mm-hmm.
becoming
And
his former self.
yeah, or trying to be. But I think he's gone through too many changes to be himself, be who he was before. He's had to experience too much without all of his power, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think we'll dip more into that perhaps next episode, which is my
Yeah.
favorite.
Yes, and you will be returning for that. I'm looking forward to that conversation. There'll be 4 of us here that night, probably. I don't think we're going to do 5. We haven't tried a 5-person video yet. So we might do that. But thank you, Bill, for coming on this week. I know it was a little short, short notice, but I
Hey,
appreciate, it's, I know you like the show and the books, so
Yeah, it's really wonderful having like a diehard fan. I know that Glenn is usually our diehard fan first and foremost, so it's nice having someone else in the perspective that I know that you've given all of your answers a lot of thought, and hearing what you have to say and what Glenn has to say is usually very interesting. Because like I said, Dune, I hadn't, I'd started reading it before and I absolutely like fell in love with it, and I need to get way more into it. And the Sandman I hadn't started watching or reading or listening to before like a couple of months ago. So I think it's important to have the opinions of like people who are like, no, like I grew up with this, like this has become like part of my background, like so it's interesting to hear your opinions on that. Yeah. And I think it's kind of cool to have someone like me to have like, okay, this is my takeaway as a first time, and then getting your learned opinion, having like both, and like see if we both have the same takeaway. That's kind of cool. I like that.
I hadn't touched the Sandman. I'd heard about it from friends for years. But when I saw that it was going to be on Netflix, I was excited. And then I saw we had the opportunity to review it here, and I'm like, all right, sure. So I'm another first timer with this property. Not quite a first timer with The Expanse, because I'd watched The Expanse, but reading it was a new experience for me when we covered that. And I only read The Witcher a few months before we started covering it on the show. Maybe 5 or 6 months before we started covering it on the show. And
that explains your excitement about reading the stories. Yeah,
exactly.
Now it makes more sense.
Yes,
okay.
and I fell completely in love with the books, especially with that narration from Peter Kenny.
My wife is obsessed with The Witcher. Loves it. The audiobooks.
Yeah, I've been listening to his audio narration for the Culture series by Ian M. Banks, Scottish author. And they're just amazing. And so many of the voices are actually in my head characters from The Witcher, because it's voices and accents he's used before. And I'm like, okay, that's who this is here. They're not okay. Yeah, I got to keep them separate. I'm like, wait, which story am I in? But I love his narration. He's not what I'm listening to at the moment, but I'm listening to a Raymond E. Feist novel, his newest. So, well, thanks for coming on. This is always wonderful.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you. Everybody at home, thank you for watching. Come back next week as we discuss episode 106. What's it called, Bill?
The Sound of Her Wings.
Beautiful
There
shirt.
we go. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to be awesome.